Why are most war narratives written by men, about men, and centered on male leaders? Why do traditional theories of international relations focus almost entirely on states, military strategy, and power competition, while ignoring how conflict affects ordinary people differently? Feminism in international relations begins with this challenge. Global politics has historically been analyzed through a gender-blind lens, and that omission distorts our understanding of power. Feminist IR does not simply ask where women are in global politics. It asks how gender shapes international systems. Scholars such as Cynthia Enloe argued that international politics depends on gendered assumptions, from the role of women in diplomatic households to labor in global supply chains. For example, during conflicts, women often face disproportionate impacts, including displacement, economic marginalization, and gender-based violence. Yet traditional security analysis tends to prioritize military outcomes over human consequences. Feminist perspectives argue that ignoring these dimensions produces incomplete analysis. Feminism also critiques how power is defined. Realism equates power with military strength and coercion. Feminist scholars argue that power also operates socially and economically. Global labor markets often rely heavily on women in textile industries, domestic work, and caregiving sectors, especially in developing economies. These labor patterns are embedded within global capitalism and trade systems. When multinational corporations outsource production to lower-cost regions, gendered labor structures become part of international political economy. Feminism therefore expands the definition of power beyond weapons and alliances. Another key contribution is the concept of human security. Rather than focusing only on state survival, Feminist IR emphasizes individual security, freedom from violence, poverty, and structural discrimination. For example, United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace, and Security recognizes that sustainable peace processes must include women's participation. Empirical studies show that peace agreements involving women are more likely to endure. This shifts the lens from state-centric security to inclusive governance and long-term stability. Feminism also analyzes representation in global decision-making. Although women increasingly serve as heads of state and diplomats, global leadership remains disproportionately male. During major negotiations, from climate talks to ceasefire agreements, gender disparities persist. Feminist scholars argue that these imbalances influence priorities and policy outcomes. For example, climate change disproportionately affects women in vulnerable communities, yet climate diplomacy historically prioritized industrial and geopolitical considerations over gender equity. Feminism in international relations does not reject traditional theories entirely. It exposes their blind spots. It argues that ignoring gender produces partial explanations of global politics. By examining how power, security, labor, and identity are shaped by gendered structures, Feminist IR broadens the analytical framework. It challenges us to rethink what security means and whose voices define global priorities. And now that you've explored how gender reshapes our understanding of power and security, the next step is to examine how these competing perspectives have clashed and evolved through the great debates in international relations.